Hi everyone, and welcome to the PTV webinar on simulating connected and autonomous vehicles in PTV Vissim. Today's webinar is being hosted by me, Alistair Evanson, Solution Director for PTV Vissim, and also my colleague Jochen Lohmiller, who is responsible for the PTV Vissim product management team here at PTV headquarters. Before we start the webinar, I just want to make you aware that the webinar is being recorded, and so it will be available to you shortly after the webinar is finished. We will be emailing a link to you. So if you need to see some part of the webinar again, you will be able to review this on the video. Also, all of the attendees are not able to use their microphone, but you are free to post comments and questions via the questions window in the GoToMeeting tab. After the webinar, both Jochen and I will be available for some time to answer your questions. So, onto the webinar itself. As we have limited time, we will be giving a short introduction into the context of modelling connected autonomous vehicles. Following this, we will highlight some of the perceived key questions and also benefits for their introduction into our transport systems. We're then going to move on into the different options that are available to users for modelling connected autonomous vehicle behaviours. And this will vary from basic functionality to very high detailed solutions using our COM interface and other external APIs. Okay, so as many of you are aware, there are different levels of automation for connected and autonomous vehicles. Currently, advanced driving assistance systems have already provided developments up to a point where we can see some level 2 and even level 3 automated vehicles on our roads, which are able to steer, accelerate and decelerate by using information that they're gathering about the driving environment around them. We're going to show in this webinar how some of the features which currently exist, such as the car-to-infrastructure communication demonstrated by Audi's traffic light V2I capability, can be modelled, as well as more advanced full automation applications which we can expect from vehicles in the near future. I think it's been quite widely communicated that we will expect to see fully autonomous vehicles on our transport systems between 2025 to 2030, and having these full fleets of autonomous vehicles operating, really the key questions are perhaps what the proportion of this vehicle fleet these autonomous vehicles will make up, and also really what the impact will be on our transport systems. So looking at those timeframes really is at the top end is up to 14 years, and having full autonomous behaviour is not a long time in order to adapt our transport systems through planning, design and implementation to be AV ready. So much of the world is looking to autonomous vehicles to solve existing transport issues, but which ones is it that they are actually going to solve? So we understand that there is an opportunity to reduce accidents. Now, the US DOT estimate that around 90% of accidents are actually due to human error. So increasing highway safety is a potential through elimination of this human error in driving, through vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and also reaction times of autonomous vehicles. We also know that many of the autonomous vehicles that are starting to be shown on the network are electric motors, and those that aren't, that perhaps use automatic braking and adaptive cruise control, have a much smoother acceleration and deceleration parameters, and that has the opportunity to actually reduce emissions in the vehicle network. It's also been widely communicated that there can be a reduction in off-street parking, and this is because moving towards a system of mobility as a service and shared mobility has an impact on the number of private car ownership. And with a smaller private car ownership, there's fewer people, for instance, driving to work and leaving their vehicle in a parking lot all day. Also, there's potential for increased road capacity and reduced congestion. And again, this is through features such as coordinated driving, so V2V communication and V2X as well. Autonomous vehicles also have the potential to provide a lot more independent mobility for perhaps older adult or mobility impaired or other mobility constrained population segments. So those people that currently perhaps don't have access to their own private transport through the shared mobility will actually have a lot more mobility options available to them. It's also expected that vehicles are going to have smaller headway and lateral distance requirements, or indeed that we may well have a requirement for fewer vehicles on the road network. And this is going to allow us to actually reallocate some of the road space to other uses in our urban areas. And this is an important role for modelling in the future, is actually to determine what capacity is required on our road networks. Perhaps our road networks can be made smaller, and that can reallocate some road space to pop-up cafes, and urban areas can see an improvement in the public realm. Also, we excuse me, have an opportunity for better use of traveller time. So rather than driving to a meeting, you can read up whilst you're in a car. You can perhaps work or speak to other people whilst travelling to your destination as well. And also there's an opportunity to move towards a more on-demand mobility as a service mode of transport. And I'm going to touch on this issue a little later in our presentation as well. However, in combination with the benefits, there are also some key questions that require answering. So we know currently that vehicles are actually used on average 50 minutes per day. But with a fully shared mobility system, vehicle kilometres travelled may actually increase due to the repositioning of vehicles and the rerouting of empty vehicles in order to collect passengers. It's clear that there's going to be a transition period as well. So we're never going to move to a situation overnight where we suddenly have 100% of autonomous vehicles on the road network. And that means that the autonomous vehicles that are introduced are going to be required to interact in a network with other vehicles that may well not be equipped with the same level of technology. So not being able to actually have vehicle-to-vehicle communication. So a key point and something that we will demonstrate again in today's webinar is really how we can use existing software to model what the impact of the introduction of varying penetration rates of autonomous vehicles can be. So if we introduce 10%, 20%, 30% of autonomous vehicles and mix those with conventional vehicles, what's the impact on our road network? What's the optimum penetration rate for these technologies? How will AVs be programmed to drive is another key question. So currently, if you're perhaps a little late to a meeting and you're driving to a meeting, you may well get in your car and speed in order to catch up a bit of time. But in the future, will AVs be programmed to drive for safety, and therefore that type of behaviour is not available? Will they be able to drive for emissions, for capacity, or a mix of all of those behaviours? And what's the impact of that driving behaviour on existing streets and intersections as well? There's a great deal of uncertainty over what the impact on road infrastructure will be. So are traffic signals required any longer? How effective can V2I communication be? Are CAV only lanes best during a mixed situation to segregate vehicle types? Also, to what extent are infrastructure upgrades required, and where is the best benefit gained? So cities have a challenge in both regulation and management. So, for instance, if each rideshare app that enters the city with their autonomous vehicle fleets have their own algorithms, who will coordinate this and actually mitigate any competing interests? You know, cities need to ensure that they maintain their regulation in the process and that they can be in charge of the routes that are chosen by these vehicles, making sure that they take appropriate routes through their network that actually works for the optimum performance of the network as a whole. It's widely communicated that there will be a reduction in the requirement for off-street parking. So, as I said before, with a reduction in private car ownership, However, it's expected there will be an increase in demand for people being dropped off at curbside. So as people use more rideshare apps, they expect to be picked up from their current location, dropped off in front of their destination. And that has an impact on things like curbside space. So how large drop-off areas do we need? The vehicle-to-vehicle communication, how that's coordinated within that area. So PTV's suite of software allows a varied level of CAV testing from both a macro testing level down to a meso and finally a micro level for much more detailed analysis. So at a macro level, we can understand mobility patterns and apply these to shared mobility autonomous trips. Identifying the demand for AVs from existing mobility patterns and perhaps calculating the following demand and routing that actually people may well transfer modes towards more AV movements. So that means that we can alter macro level properties when we're talking about speeds and simple driving behaviours to replicate some of the capacity issues AVs will bring and the impact this could also have on route choice. At a mesoscopic level, concerning cities, what is the impact on the network assignment? We can use a simplified driving model and altered parameters to see whether vehicles choose alternative routes. So can capacity be maintained or increased with shorter standstill distances? And what will the overall travel patterns of a city be with an AV fleet? And then finally, what we're going to concentrate on today is really at a micro level. So taking the demand and actually testing the impact of how those vehicles will drive on our transport system. So it's not just the demand, it's also taking that micro level driving behavior. And that provides us a lot more detailed level of AV modeling. So we can actually replicate entirely CAV behaviors through the adoption of the required algorithms and also provide that virtual environment in which to test AVs. So by using PTV Vissim, it allows us to set a virtual environment to undertake CAV testing, meaning we can do multiple scenarios and analyze large amounts of data quicker than real-world prototyping. We can simulate the different levels of autonomous features in vehicles. So when we were discussing before, from level 2 right through to level 5 of full automation. And we can do that across different modes and in a variety of different locations as well. So we can virtually replicate the traffic conditions of any road network and then evaluate the performance of those connected autonomous vehicles and autonomous vehicles, their impact on interaction with other vehicles, so non-AVs, and also the surrounding infrastructure as well. A general workflow for this type of application is to set the network up, which can be done in a wide range of ways, such as building the network in Vissim from scratch, importing a network from Visum, which in turn can be generated from something like OpenStreetMap, as well as importing a network from other software which we currently have interfaces with, such as Prescan, CarMaker, or Bentley Concept Station. Next, we need to input the traffic data, and here you have the opportunity to specify how many vehicles are in the model, the type of vehicles, for example, the proportion of AVs, as well as the individual driving behavior settings. Any background traffic which is not AV and the network in general can be calibrated to replicate the real-world situation. Finally, all the different scenarios can then be set up to test the question that you want to have answered, and then we can run the simulation in Vissim any number of times with different iterations and extract really detailed results, which can be defined each time step for the individual vehicles. A key characteristic for CAV modelling is making sure you know what you want to test so that you can make sure the model replicates the types of behaviours you want it to and provides the answers to the questions that you're asking. It might be that you want to test what impact CAVs will have on the speed-flow relationship of an expressway or the capacity at an intersection, or to support future infrastructure design. All of these tests can be done in Vissim, but it's also important to then consider how the CAV will drive and operate in those conditions. For example, will they be able to communicate with infrastructure? What acceleration or deceleration profiles will they apply? How do they interact with non-CAVs, and so on. If you don't know the exact answers to these questions, then PTV Vissim can also be used to narrow the field of the range of potential parameters by running multiple scenarios with small variations in parameters and identifying which has the biggest effect on what you're testing. And I'll actually come on to demonstrate that within the software in a couple of minutes. So now we're going to move on to the next stage of the webinar, where we discuss how to model connected autonomous vehicles. So there are a couple of methods. Firstly, I'm going to deal with some simple AV behaviours that we can actually model within Vissim by adjusting human driving behaviours internally within the software. And then Jochen is going to actually detail the various APIs and scripting solutions that we have. It's important to say that the examples that we're presenting now are also going to be available in a future service pack of Vissim, so all of the users with an active maintenance contract will be able to open these examples and use them for their own tests. Now, the scope of the examples that we're showing is really to demonstrate what the capability of modelling CAV behaviour is within Vissim. We've developed these examples on our own assumptions of how CAVs will operate, but clearly the detailed kind of parameters and behaviours for the actual CAV behaviour are going to be fully customizable in Vissim. So if you have your own knowledge of how CAVs will drive, you can adapt and actually model that to a high level of detail. So what we're providing really is just an example based on our own assumptions to demonstrate that functionality that we have within PTV Vissim. Okay, so now I'll move into a model that we have within Vissim, and this, as I mentioned, is a very simple model where we've just changed some of the driving behavior parameters within Vissim to replicate some AV particular behaviors. Now here we've set up a junction that has different vehicle compositions on each arm. So on the western entry we have 100% conventional vehicles, the north and east entry have a mix of normal vehicles and AV vehicles, and the south entry has AV vehicles, which can be shown in red. Now, when I run this simulation, what we can see is actually that the headway, so the standstill distance of the vehicles at the stop line have been adjusted. So with the AV scenario, we can actually see that the vehicles are queuing a lot closer together. And in a mixed condition, there's a variation in the gaps between the vehicles. Now, this could well be to replicate what we expect AVs to be able to do with vehicle-to-vehicle communication, having a lot smaller standstill distance when they follow each other or when they are at traffic signals. We've also changed the desired speed distributions within this model. Presumably, AVs will be able to have a much flatter desired speed distribution, as they will be able to drive at the same speed across the network. So what we're doing here is we're just very quickly analysing what the average delay and current queue length is within the model, and we can actually see that the east and southern entries, which is where we have the highest mix of AVs, and the southern entry where we have 100% of AVs, we can see that we have the lowest level of delay and queue length in this scenario, which perhaps is not a great surprise to us, but demonstrates that we can test this type of thing within Vissim. Now, we can also use scenario management to actually test a variety of parameters. And I mentioned this before about perhaps not knowing the exact behaviors that could be adopted in the network. And maybe we would like to test a range to actually understand what's the maximum and what's the minimum that we could expect in performance. So I've actually used scenario management within Vissim to set up some different scenarios where we have varying standstill distances. So within scenario 1, we have the 1 meter standstill, which is running at the moment, but actually I've set up a sequence of scenarios down to a scenario 5 where we just have a 0.2 meter standstill. And when I've run these models through scenario management, I can actually see, using scenario comparison, that I can measure the throughput or the capacity of that junction in each of those scenarios. So here I have my 5 scenarios represented by different color bars. And we can actually see for the southern arm, as expected, the throughput is smallest with the larger standstill distance and largest with the smaller standstill distance. And again, the north and east have a relatively similar level of throughput, which actually tells us that perhaps the 20% difference between the penetration rates of 40% and 60% hasn't had a significant impact on the throughput of this junction, whereas the western arm with the conventional vehicles that have a larger mix of standstill distances, because they're on the standard human distributions where some people leave bigger gaps, some people leave smaller gaps, has the lowest of all the standstill distances. So that's a very quick example of how we can start to use Vissim to test this type of behavior within PTV Vissim. Now I'm going to hand over to Jochen, who will go into a lot more detail on the actually much more detailed driving behaviors that we can model within Vissim.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Alistair. So I'll show you a little bit more about the capabilities of scripting in PTV Vissim. So what you can do externally for modeling connected and autonomous vehicles, making use of one of the 3 interfaces which are suitable for connected and autonomous vehicles. I'll later explain the driver model and the driving simulator, and now show some examples on the COM interface. So the COM interface, component object model, is a Microsoft interface which is used how different programs collaborate with each other. So for example, you can start Vissim and control Vissim from Excel, or you can make use of MATLAB to control Vissim, but also Python or from Visual Studio or something like that. So from a script, you can make use of Vissim as an automation server. And within the COM, you have access to all available attributes in the simulation. So this could be every single vehicle. And for every single vehicle, the position, the current speed, acceleration, orientation on the lane, all these attributes can be read. And also a lot of these attributes can be edited in the simulation. And also additional functions are available. So for example, simulation control, so you can run another simulation step or run a simulation until a certain position. You can create or remove vehicles, also pedestrians if you're doing a pedestrian simulation in PTV Vissim, and also simulating on how vehicles receive signals or not, depending on their distance from the origin of the signal. I'll now do a little first. Yeah, we have a dedicated webinar on scripting with the COM interface, and you can access it on our webinar archive page if you are more into the COM programming, and if you started. So it's an introduction on it. In Vissim 8, we introduced event-based scripts because we found that COM always has a little bit overhead when you make a COM call, and this reduces the overhead per call almost to 0. So within Vissim, you can set some scripts, and the scripts, they stay active during the entire simulation run. Another advantage is also that the global variables retain their values between event-based calls of the script's function. And I'll show you now a simple example how to make use of these persistent event-based script. So here's a very simple network. It's just one link with 3 lanes, and there is no vehicle input. In here, we're generating the vehicle input, making use of a script, and I'll show you the script now. This is a simple function, add vehicle at link position. This is the function we make use of it, and it defines the vehicle type, a link number, a lane number, a position, and a desired speed. So they are going with 80 kilometers per hour in this example. So on the script, it is set this script and it executes at the time step start. You can specify a from and to maximum time and the period. This period says every 20 time step this script will be executed. If we look at our simulation parameters, we're currently simulating with 10 time steps per simulation second. That means this script gets executed every second. So, and here's the script file linked and the function to be called. So, and if I run this model, we'll see every 2 seconds a vehicle appearing on link number 1 and lane number 1 as it is specified in the script. So now you can make use also of user-defined attributes, and I've prepared a user-defined attributes. This is a lane number. It's a user-defined attributes of the script here, and I can make use of this user-defined attribute in my script. So therefore, I'll go back to the script, and instead of using lane, I change it to current script. This is a variable which always is available in persistent script, and I read from the current script the attribute value lane. So instead of having a fixed number, lane number 1, I read now the lane attribute in Vissim. So, and if I change this lane attribute to 2, yeah, I saved it, and I execute this script again, then the vehicles will appear on lane number 2. And it's very flexible, so I can make use of the same function multiple times. So for example, I duplicate this script 2 times and have one lane 1 and 2 and 3, and I'll change the period. On lane 1 I want to have every 1 second, every 10 time step 1 second a vehicle. Let's make here every 3 seconds, and from lane 1 only from simulation time 5 seconds to 20 seconds. So, and if we just execute it, we see now vehicles appearing every 2 seconds on lane number 2 and every 1 second on lane number 1, but only from simulation time to 5 to 20. Now we're over 20, so no more vehicles will appear on lane number 1, and on lane number 3 we'll see vehicles every 3 seconds appearing. So one application, and is used also in an example, is to generate platoons, making use of this functionality. So instead of now only creating one vehicle, we could also have another attribute in our script, number of vehicles to be generated. Therefore, we need to change the script. So instead of only generating one script, we're making a for loop for I in range, and now I use the same expression. I read the value from my current script, and this is num vehicle, and I execute when I call the script, I go through this loop and I create 5 vehicle instead of 1 vehicle. And of course, when I create vehicle, I don't want to create all the vehicles at the same position, at position 0. That's why I add once I created one vehicle, I add to the position 15 meters, so that vehicles will be created on different positions on the link. So if I save it and go back to Vissim, of course now I need to change the period. So I change the period of all of them to 150, and I want to create 5 vehicles for all different lanes. And if I just execute this, I'll see the platoons created for lane number 1 and 2, but for 1 only from simulation time to 5 to simulation time 20, and for lane 2 and 3 the attributes are identical. And of course I can just vary it just to get the idea. I make it here more frequently. I make here only 3 number and here 5 numbers, and I'll copy this and make it also from 0 to max, and then you see you can configure it differently. And this is a way how to generate a platoon. And of course, you can also change this if you go to the script. Also, link could be read by a user-defined attribute or the vehicle type or the desired speed. So you can make this only one function available all over your network to work with. So one application of this platooning, we can have a look in this model. So the question to be answered in this model is, how will platoons perform in terms of speed flow, or what is the optimal platoon size? And if you want to find out this, you can make use of such an example. You need to make some assumption of the connected autonomous vehicle behavior. Here, our assumption was vehicles are able to communicate with each other, and the cooperation in merging situations. So vehicle who will make use if another vehicle want to enter the highway, and they keep smaller distance and smaller headways as shown previously by Alistair. So we also make use of internal parameter adjustment, but also in combination with external script, and they keep the exact speed. So we have a highway with an on-off ramp, and yeah, the internal script, as you see them here, they are used to generate the platoons. I'll now change to 3-dimensional level. I start the simulation, and we'll see at the entry link in a second platoons being generated. Here always 5 platoons are generated, and the vehicles, they have different colors. Currently they are all black because they are all driving on their desired speed. Now we see here one vehicle is already green. This vehicle has a higher desired speed. This is because, and I'll jump step by step forward, the vehicle in front of it already communicated to this vehicle that the vehicle will leave the highway. So we'll see that. It's not only the one vehicle in front, it's the 2 vehicles in front. They go now on the exit ramp. That's why this vehicle has already a higher desired speed in order to close the gap which these 2 vehicles leave on the platoon. So if we follow this platoon, this vehicle now accelerates because there's space in front of the vehicle and closes the gap of this platoon. Now, run a little bit faster. Now the gap is closed. And we see this also on other platoons. When a vehicle leaves a platoon, the vehicle then will accelerate. Now we have another situation. This vehicle, red color means the desired speed is below of the 80 kilometers per hour, which they are all traveling. So this one is on an on-ramp, and now it changed its desired speed. It accelerates in order to merge into a platoon. And once we come here to a position where it's close to merge, we'll see now this vehicle changes color to red, so it decelerates in order to make room for the green vehicle to enter the platoon. So this is the way how the communication is modeled in this example. And if we follow this platoon, the green vehicle will now enter, and now they are all turning green because this vehicle has entered the platoon. It's on the lane of the platoon, and all vehicles, following vehicle, now will close the gap until the gap is closed, and now they are in their desired distance, and they turn black in order to drive again with 80 kilometers per hour. So this is this platooning example. And of course, you can do some evaluation. So for example, you can have a look at different speeds, and Vissim will help you to identify where are the spots where low speeds are, or the same with densities. So there are multiple evaluations available in PTV Vissim to evaluate the current simulation, or multiple simulation where you can make your aggregates. Another example which we prepared is an urban example with an intersection. So we have here 4 arms on this intersection. And the question in this urban intersection is, what is the intersection capacity? And what effect does the signal communication and adjusting speed to fuel consumption and energy consumption? So because AVs are very likely electrical cars, it's more about the range of electrical vehicles. The assumption for this CAV behavior is that vehicles, they keep smaller headways. This is for AVs and CAVs. They react faster to the signal, so once it turns green, they start directly, where conventional vehicles, they have a reaction time. And connected and autonomous vehicles are able to communicate with the signal controller and adjust their speed in order to arrive at green. So if we look at their different vehicle types, so from the west we have conventional vehicles. These are the black vehicles. From the north we have autonomous vehicles. They have different driving behaviors, but they're not able to receive the signal information. And from the south, we have connected autonomous vehicles. They share the same driving behavior than the autonomous vehicles, but they are able to receive the signal information and they adjust their speed. So the CAVs, they are red, and the AVs, they are yellow. From the east entry, we see a mixed flow from connected autonomous vehicles and autonomous vehicles, 50%, 50%. So here this is set up that the green time is 8 seconds per cycle time of 60 seconds, and the vehicle input is the same on each approach. So if we simulate that, on the right-hand side, you see the fuel consumption, which is calculated in Vissim, and if you compare it to each other, we see the conventional cars, they have the highest fuel consumption. And also the number of stops, which is clear because you see them now, the red vehicles, they adjust their speed, they drive slow in order to arrive when the signal turns green. Here, for example, on this approach, you see very clear these vehicles drive very slow in order to arrive just when the signal turns green, so that the vehicles don't have to stop, they don't have a standstill. So this also makes use of internal scripts, but also it makes use of user-defined attributes. Using formular user-defined attributes, as they are defined in this network, you can already make many calculations with PTV Vissim, which might be faster and makes it more transparent because you have the calculated attributes within the Vissim GUI, the user interface, so you can visualize them using labels, color scheme, or charge. So it's the same what we do here for the cycle time. And I'll calculate, for example, in this example for the signal controller, what is the time until the next green. I can do that easily because I'm using here a fixed time signal control. So, and the vehicles itself, they know about their distance to the signal head. So if we have a look in this user-defined attributes, it uses a formula. This is basically only checking if there is no signal head and if the position of the vehicle is larger than the position of the signal head. And if this is not the case, it calculates the position by the vehicle looks on its current lane, what is the next signal head, the position of the next signal head, and subtract its own position. And that is how a vehicle then calculates the distance. And we see this during the simulation running. Distance to signal head, if we go a little bit further down, it's constantly updated, and you see the values in the Vissim guy, and you can make use of charts or anything to visualize them. Then knowing about the distance to the signal head and knowing about, if I just pause it here because it's changing too much, knowing about the speed, the distance to the signal head, and knowing about what is the time until the next green and the time until the next green, I can calculate the maximum speed for green start, which means when I go faster than the maximum speed of green start, let's just take an example vehicle, for example this one. So this vehicle here, the distance to the signal is 200 meters. If it goes over 24 kilometers per hour, it will arrive the signal in red. If it goes a little bit lower, under the 24 kilometers per hour, it will arrive in green time. But then there's a green end, so it calculates also when it goes faster than the 18 kilometers per hour, it will arrive before the green ends in the next green stage. But if it's going below 18.4 kilometers per hour, it will arrive after the next green end. So, and then we make just use of the script and constantly updating the desired speed of the vehicle. Currently it's 22.07 kilometers per hour in order so that the vehicle arrives right within the next green phase. And if we follow this vehicle, it adjusts the speed. And because all of the vehicle adjust their speed, they will form like pulses to arrive when the signal turns green. So this is what we see here. We have this pulse here in order to arrive all of them when it's green, and then they flow through the signal. And of course, also on this example, as shown in the platooning example, you can make use of different evaluations. Very interesting here, of course, is the speed. Here the speed is very low on this link because vehicles, they stop here. And here you see the speed is almost the same on the entire link because they adjust their speed in order to arrive right at green. Same if we look at density, we have here a high density of vehicles because a lot of people wait here. In here on this link, we have like a equal density through the link because they form this pulse and adjust their speed. So these are some examples how these connected and autonomous vehicles can be simulated in PTV Vissim. If you want to go have your own algorithms, so all the example where make use of the internal driving behavior, which is very flexible, where you have lots of parameters to adjust, so that it replicates like AV behavior. But if you want to have your own car following model applied into the simulation, this is also possible using the external driver model. So it replaces the internal driving behavior with a user-defined one. It can be activated for different vehicle types. So you don't have to control all vehicles. You can select which vehicles you want to control, and you can control different vehicle types with different external driver models. So what it does, PTV Vissim passes state of vehicles and surrounding to the DLL for each individual time step. So only the surrounding of the vehicle gets passed to the interface, and then the DLL computates a reaction, which is the acceleration, deceleration, and lateral behavior of the vehicles from this information what it gets from Vissim. And it passes back in the next time step. So this is external driver model. And the other interface is the driving simulator interface. There, during each interaction, you set a position and of a vehicle controlled externally. So like a human driver, if you have a steering wheel, you have an acceleration pedal and a braking pedal, you can drive through a Vissim network with a vehicle. So you define with your acceleration, with your steering wheel position, where this vehicle is located in the next time step, what's the so the position, the speed, the orientation of this vehicle, and also if you want to activate detectors or not. This is set from the external control, and of course it doesn't have to be a human driving with this simulator. This can also be an algorithm controlling a vehicle. And this is passed then to Vissim. Vissim simulates, and all the vehicles will react to this vehicle or vehicles. This could be multiple vehicles controlled externally. And Vissim then passes back the traffic and the signal states of the entire simulation. So it passes back all the vehicles about their position, orientation, speed, so that you can make use of them in the interface. So if you just imagine of a simulator with a human simulator, you can visualize all the vehicles controlled by Vissim in your simulator. Or if you do like AV modeling, you get all the sensors, all the vehicles position in your network. And this interface, we have different links with companies. So one of this is with car makers, which is from IPG. It's a high accurate simulation of a vehicle with all the dynamics within the vehicle. And here on this example, this yellow vehicle is controlled by car maker, and you see this vehicle here in the left in Vissim with the red vehicles, and this is updated within every time step, the position. So the Vissim vehicles, they will react to this car maker vehicle, and car maker, as you see here, will get all the position of the vehicles. So you'll get you have a high resolution vehicles simulation, but what Vissim can deliver is the surrounding. So you get surrounding vehicles, and you can make use of all functionality in Vissim, the different parameters, the different stochastics, sometimes could be more vehicles. You can put different scenarios, and you can make use of this in your vehicle testing. Another interface is with Prescan. So this is the company TAS, and there's also the interface where vehicles, it makes use of the same driving simulator interface. So Prescan is more about the sensor controlling, and so you run a co-simulation with both. With both Prescan and CarMaker, you can also export, as Alistair previously explained, you can export the network so that you can have the network in both systems. Okay, so I'll hand back to Alistair.
Okay, hello everyone again. Just to highlight really that PTV Vissim has been used in a number of projects globally for the use and modelling of connected autonomous vehicles. Some of you may well be familiar with those, and looking at the attendees list, some of you may well have actually worked in these projects as well. One that is currently being executed that PTV are participating in is the Coexist EU project, and out of that we're actually hoping to have some research related to CAV behaviours within PTV Vissim. So just as a final slide really on the examples, I mentioned before about on-demand mobility and mobility as a service, and we talked today quite a lot about the advanced use of Vissim through the COM interface. We do also have functionality now within the COM interface that allows us to reroute vehicles as the simulation is running. And we can do that through the COM interface. And that means that we can actually simulate the interaction of mobility service and rideshare apps. So in this particular example, what we can see is vehicles are actually within the network, this red vehicle that's driving around. And at certain points, such as now, it has no current trip request. So that vehicle doesn't have a route in the network, and it will stay where it is. And then when a request is called by someone actually requesting a trip in their app, the vehicle will reroute to the specific origin to pick that person up, and then it will be assigned a destination and a route, and actually then circulate to drop that person off at their chosen position. Now, as you can as well see in the video, we can take lots of analytics out of that, so we can actually see the length of time that the person had to wait in order for the vehicle to arrive to pick them up, and then obviously the length of time that the vehicle took to then reach its own destination. So you can think about the application of that within urban environments, where we're actually seeing, you know, the number of vehicles that we potentially would like to see within the rideshare fleet to guarantee customers certain level of service. And these type of measures. So this is something that we're also looking at within PTV Group, within the topic of mobility as a service, and we have a full MAS program which has a number of different products in it that we're currently developing, and you may well have seen some of these communicated through various conferences and LinkedIn posts and so on. Okay, so really just to summarize, this is the end of the webinar now, but as you've seen today, microsimulation provides a really good opportunity to actually use a virtual testbed to analyze the performance and behavior and the impact of autonomous vehicles as well as connected autonomous vehicles on our transport systems. And we have a number of features within Vissim that really help that workflow. So as you've seen, we have very detailed driving behavior interaction models, but we also have things like scenario management, which allows you to do multiple simulations, changing individual parameters sequentially, little by little, and then actually taking the results out and analyzing what the differences are between those, perhaps identifying what the key parameters would be that would give you optimal operation of your transport systems. Jochen's examples demonstrated quite clearly how Vissim can be used for vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure capabilities, as well as having our APIs that allow external vehicle control through the driving simulator interface. So, as I mentioned before, all of the examples that have been presented today are going to be available in a future service pack of Vissim, so you can take those on and you can change some of those parameters, make them your own, and apply them to your own transport systems and transport networks around the world. These examples really are provided as a guide to demonstrate what those parameters are. So we're not replicating necessarily direct AV driving behaviors, but what we're doing is demonstrating the modeling techniques that you can apply within PTV Vissim to make sure that you replicate the types of AV behaviors that you have been assigned to and that answer the questions that you'd like to ask. Okay, so that's it from us here. As I said before, thanks very much for everyone attending. We have a really nice number of attendees on this webinar, which is good. It shows us that it's a very interesting subject to you, and we have quite a few people asking questions as well, which again is good. It shows that everyone's engaged. I mentioned before, Jochen and I and the rest of the PTV product management team are currently online, so we will get through as many questions as we can, and we'll stay online to keep answering those as well. So thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you soon.